Everybody see the record button? Oh, yep, there we go. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining Lunch with GreenTown. It's a 5-week series of talks on environmental topics of interest to me in GreenTown and local people. We like projects like planting trees, doing bike rides, cleaning creeks. We had our last talk on Tuesday was Shiloh Ballard, who was talking about getting more people on bikes. And I have to tell you, one way to do that is just to get somebody out there on a bike. Because once they try it, just do it, was the message. Once they try it, they're going to probably find they like it. And then you can create a new habit. So that's why we like to do things. We want to encourage people. Encouragement is a big part of what we do. We have a summer internship program, and that's been a lot of fun. I love working with the next generation, and they help us and we help them. We've had some good success stories there. I won't tell you about those today. So let me just basically, these talks run for about an hour. There will be time for questions at the end, although Louie probably can carry us for the full hour. Put your questions in the chat box, and if when they become relevant, I will pass them on to Louie. They are being recorded, as you know, and eventually I'll get those posted on our YouTube channel. I'd like to give a big shout out to the Parks and Rec Department for their help in hosting the series, and also to the Sereno Group, the real estate group. They provided funds for the outreach with a grant from 1% for Good, their community program on climate and culture funds. So today it's Louie, and we're going to learn about waste. We're all pretty good about sorting things, I think. We've got the 3 containers, and I think every day we think about it a little bit. I know I do. I put the plastic waste in, and I wonder, does that really get sorted? And how well is it being handled? So I'm looking forward to the answer to that one, Louie. And on that note, Louie has been co-hosted here. I'm still admitting people. He's going to have some slides to share with us, and he's going to tell us what's going on in the world of waste and recycling. Louie, you're up to bat.
Thank you, Gary. I'm Louie Pelligrini. I'm one of the owners of Mission Trail Waste System, and I'm a resident of Los Altos since 1969. So I'm proud to serve the community in the waste and recycling collection services. I wasn't sure exactly the topic. I assume I'm talking to Los Altos residents and maybe commercial businesses and maybe some Los Altos Hills people. So I'm going to bring up my program slide, which I kind of mimicked. Preparing for this, I did a similar presentation in 2014, GreenTown. So I'm going to try and share this now and see if we get it going right.
Yeah, we have a long history. GreenTown started as one of our major projects back over 10 years ago, was to work on the waste contract with the city. And we made a big switch at that time, and Mission Trails was part of that switch, and the diversion rate went up dramatically with the changes that were put in place. So Louie and GreenTown kind of started together.
All right. Can everybody see that screen I'm sharing?
Start the slideshow. It looks good.
Yes.
Okay. Like I said, Mission Trail Waste Systems became your service provider in October of 2010. And we've just negotiated an extension for another 10 years. It started July 1 of 2020, technically as a new contract term. So state laws, diversion data, recycling efforts are all kind of what I'm going to try and focus on here today. And if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And moving on to state laws, going back to 1989, every community in state has to deal with AB 939, which required 50% recycled by 2000. Then came along AB 32, greenhouse gas reduced to 1990 levels by 2020. There's been no reporting of those successful efforts as of yet. But that was like an overarching piece of legislation that kind of drove further legislation into our area of waste management, recycling, and the like. 2012, there was a AB 341, mandatory commercial recycling with goals. AB 939 back in the day had mandates, and there was $10,000 a day fines if a jurisdiction didn't meet the required thresholds on diversion. Since then, everything's kind of been goals. So there's no real hammer per se, but until the latest one at the bottom, 1383. 1826 was a similar goal of reducing the organic waste stream by 50% by 2020. The big 800-pound gorilla, AB 1383, is what kind of driving everything right now, to reduce the organic fraction going into the landfill on 2014 waste characterization that was done on a regional basis. That one is really tied to short-lived climate pollutants. They don't use the word methane gas or VOCs. There's some other science that says we need to get all this organic material out. Basically, that's anything that can rot. That's not just food scraps. It's not just yard waste. It's dimensional lumber that isn't treated, food, soiled paper, or cardboard. So even though that one was acted in 2016 and has a thresholds, the regulations just came out certified by the Office of Administrative Law in the last 6 months. So everything's already behind schedule as far as the state's enforcement and requirements. On top of all that, new bills this year, which are going to help, supposedly help everything. Sometimes I wish they would just leave all the laws the way they are so it could implement, make them happen before they start throwing more at us all from a private sector hauler kind of situation. Apparently, the US got out of the Basel Convention. Now we're getting back in. And that kind of international law controlling where waste and stuff can be exported on a international basis. And if you're not part of the Basel Convention, those
Actually pronounced Basel.
excuse me, those you can't participate. And you're kind of locked out of those international laws between countries, but the US is getting back in. A lot of on plastic waste diversion, on export, kind of mimicking the Basel Convention, but there's a lot of duplication. Allen, SB 343, environmental advertising, truth in advertising, the recycling symbols, trying to make products more truly represented in any kind of marking on the container, the chasing arrows or any other kind of advertisement to really be truth in advertising. And kind of this thing, solid waste, once again, labeling whether it's compostable, whether it's biodegradable. In regard to plastics, which it's a confusing topic. Trying to push SB 54, producer responsibility if they make a plastic product, what happens to it after. Single-use food containers, once again, there's multiple areas when you start thinking about this that I know has been a big topic among GreenTown and a lot of communities, especially with all the pollution in the ocean.
Well, maybe you could elaborate on that one a little bit, because that is a very much of interest to GreenTown, is the single-use plastic. You know, we get a lot of these containers, they've got a label on the bottom, 1, 2, 3, up to 7 or whatever. And so do those get sorted out, and what happens to them?
So there's 7 classifications of resin that a plastic container could be marked with. It's not a requirement. There's no overarching authority over those the labeling per se, the chasing arrows. Then there's the type of container. You got film plastic, you got rigid. I can't get into all the, I fully don't understand all the differences, but from a consumer, a generator of waste or recycling material, those have different values, different markets, onshore, offshore, and what's the word, quality issues of that material, making it back into the reconstituted in the same type of container or going into something different. You got FDA on health requirements, if it's a cosmetic container or a food container, recycled content, all comes into play. You would have a list of 100 pages of where any type of plastic could be, any type of container, and what would be eligible to come back in different forms or fashions.
Well, it's obviously way too complicated. And so
I'm
help us out here a little bit. I take my plastic clamshell and toss it into the trash or into the recycling. How do you get it sorted out?
So we also provide services to about 10 other cities in and around the Bay Area. We have our MRF, Materials Recovery Facility, up in San Leandro. And early on, Green Team people had a tour of it, and maybe that's something, Gary, you would like to, we could work a tour. We could bring people up there and show how it works.
Yeah, the next time we can take our masks off and do that, that'd be great.
So currently we're processing about 300 tons a day through this facility.
How much?
300 tons a day.
Wow.
Out of city of Alameda, city of San Leandro, Castro Valley, San Ramon, Livermore, Los Altos, and some Santa Clara material, and Pleasanton, Dublin material also. So it's all under what's called a single stream collection system, where you put all your stuff in one container, the blue container, and that gets picked up by a collection vehicle. And that vehicle, it all kinds of gets compacted. In Los Altos' material, those route trucks that service Los Altos come to our facility in Santa Clara, which is a transfer station, where we take those 5 or 6 ton loads from the collection vehicle, put those all in a large transfer trailer and haul out 18 tons at a time up to San Leandro, which is done on a backhaul of a garbage load coming out of San Leandro being dumped in Newbie Island landfill. The carbon footprint of all this, we kind of keep it reduced and cost effective. At that point, we're running 2 shifts a day with about 30 people on each shift, where this single stream material, everything that you mixed in the blue container goes up some conveyor belts, goes over some big screens, disc screens that kind of size the material. And then we have magnets, eddy current, and we're looking at some robotic arms to segregate the different commodities. The fiber cardboard comes off, the large pieces are easily sorted by the disc screens. The mixed paper products go another way. All the containers are kind of shook out on a smaller screen. So as that material flows through, we are segregating it the best we can mechanically. At the end, it takes some substantial manual input for quality control. The little bits of plastic, the glass gets broken in the process. All the small pieces of stuff don't really get captured. because of the screening process. And at a certain point, has to be cost effective. But we were running 20 tons an hour through that facility and marketing the commodity. Later on in my slides, I have some statistics on some of that.
All right, why don't you go ahead and continue then? That was a nice tour. Good oversight. Thank you.
So anyway, a lot of plastic bills gets into thermoform and on the organic implementation strategy. So let me move on. We get into some other questions later. So AB 939, one of the gauges for jurisdiction or communities' success at diverting material. AB 939 was 50% by 2010. They changed the law. Now they calculate diversion on a community, the tons that are disposed in the landfill divided by either the persons per day that's in the community, and that's another number that comes from the state, basically population, or on a commercial jobs in the community. Los Altos is mainly a bedroom community with no heavy industry or the like. With Los Altos Hills, I think there's only one commercial business up there. So the pounds per day calculation, in 2009, there's a target. That target is pounds per day represented a 50% diversion. So in Los Altos in 2009, if the calculation target to be at 50%, which that law required, mandated, was 4.4 pounds. We took over the contract in October of 2010. The state said Los Altos was doing 3.7 tons. This is from my last presentation I made to GreenTown in 2014. Los Altos had moved from where it was ranked in the other communities in Santa Clara County to number 3 at 2.6%. I was very proud to help make that happen with the residents and the businesses in Los Altos. We gave all the tools there, all the containers. Everybody basically pays on the amount of garbage they generate in Los Altos. And you have the ability to go from a 20-gallon cart in a residential to a 32-gallon, a 64 or 96, depending how many people in the household. What you can not divert goes into the garbage. And all commercial businesses are on the same premise. Recycling is free. The more you recycle, you can reduce your garbage container or frequency of service and save money. So these tonnage figures, pounds per day per person, include the commercial activity in that. The other unique thing, Mission Trail Waste System does not handle all the material going to the landfill out of Los Altos. Contractors are allowed self-haul, residents are allowed self-haul. I think the actual tonnage that these numbers represent, because the state looks at everything that was tagged coming from Los Altos, we're about 70% of that. And a lot of that other material is construction material. So there's been a big up and down on construction based on the economy and a bunch of other stuff going on. So I don't think I have the number in this slide, but we have even improved on this number. And Los Altos Hills in Santa Clara County has always been at the top of the heap because bedroom community. Monte Sereno is another bedroom community. From my perspective, Los Altos and Saratoga are kind of the same size, same makeup of residential and commercial. So the state says you shouldn't be comparing this stuff, but I can't help myself. We're, for the size and type of city Los Altos is, it's at the top of the heap, in my opinion. So here's a bunch of numbers. Kind of a diversion history. This is the way my brain works all the time and trying to keep track of this. 2011 was the first year for 12 months, we had handled the material coming out of Los Altos. The total generated 30,705 tons. If we go down that column for 2011, in that first year, 29% was landfilled, 45% went to composting, and 27% went to recycling. This is diverted from the landfill. So 71% diversion in 2011. And economy, weather, drought conditions, there's no real rhyme or reason what goes up, what goes down in this solid waste. New construction coming online, any new bigger commercial buildings, grocery stores that have come into town over that period. So you look at that history going across, 2018 and 2019 were the best years, if we want to look at it that way, where only 25% was landfilled. Forest compost, the largest percentage was composted in those 2 years, and the recycling percentage was kind of on par. I have numbers through the end of 2020. Our recycling has increased to its highest level in 2020. Compared, well, 2016, it was at the same 28%. The composting has kind of been pretty constant. So on a total over the 10 years in Los Altos, we've only landfilled 29% was generated through our collection systems, 45% was composted, and 27% recycled. So over the last 10 years, 71% of material generated that we collect were diverted. I'm proud of that number. Over to the top right, I looked at 2020 over 2011. So what was generated in 2011, we've decreased that overall in the city, and there's been growth in the city by 6%. So 1,700 tons less generated in Los Altos than what we had in 2011. So I think that's considered everybody doing their job. I'm going to move down to the single stream residual. Now, everybody uses the blue bin. After we process that, there's stuff that's left over. Whether it's contaminated, it wasn't the right material, it shouldn't have been put there in the first place, or markets have disappeared, in particular with certain types of plastic, and I can get into that. So these are the main metrics I kind of look at as what we're doing, because it affects everything. We got to be successful. We got to meet the mandates. And how can we do more? How can we do more? That's what I keep hearing. I think Los Altos is doing a fantastic job. And yes, there's always improvement, but all the low-hanging fruit, all the proper efforts have been put into it. The residents are educated, and we're making progress. How much more can we get? I don't have a crystal ball, but the more you try to get more at the levels that we are, at the end of the day, it gets more expensive, because you have to go after stuff that isn't easily captured in the actual processing of the material, and the markets for it are probably not there, which means there's more cost associated with trying to go for that extra diversion tons. And I looked at Los Altos and Los Altos Hills on this pounds per day, and I just wanted to see the trend, because Los Altos Hills is somewhat similar, a little different geographical, topographical, but it's another method of collection up there. And for me, it's a different hauler. So I like to see how we're doing compared to Los Altos Hills. And you look at the trend line, it's kind of some of the similar experiences. So there's different ways to get it done. Their collection system's a little different than what we have in Los Altos proper, but we're all doing an effort, and we're both successful in all the mandates in both communities.
So Louis, it's kind of, it's in the 70% diversion rate and it's holding steady actually, but that's great. But what else can we do as customers? Is there anything else that we can do?
Well, this is overall community tonnages. On the residential sector, which I think mostly residents here, you are actually in the 87% diversion. If we just look at the single family homes and the materials that are being thrown out, recycled, you're at 87%. The commercial, now commercial waste stream is different than the residential. You'll never get 75% out of a commercial waste stream. The types of materials that are there won't get to 75%. Your multifamily is probably another one. The commercial is probably in the 30% diversion. The multifamily is, residential units, different housing situation, collection points. There's more potential to be gained out of the multifamily sector in Los Altos. I don't think we could get much more out of the residential single family homes. Commercial, you're on par with most other communities. The multifamily is where it gets tricky. Everybody has difficulty sourcing and getting the material out of the people move in and out. They don't have the space for it. It's a complicated one. The other big one in Los Altos is construction and demo material. Where most materials going to a high diversion facility. We don't sort that out. That's a whole different type of facility. But they're averaging about 80% diversion what's coming out of the construction sector. And the amount of construction that happens on campus, on Los Altos, whether it's residential or new commercial, more high density redevelopment, it's a crystal ball. So when you say, what more can we do? I think the single family homes have done it. The commercial, and now with the pandemic, that's trying to figure those numbers out. And the multifamily, I think, is where the focus needs to be to really overall get more diversion out of Los Altos.
Okay, thank you.
So recycling markets. This is the graph at the top is the, sorry, I think might be hard to see the colors and the like, but this is the makeup of the material that is sold. Just in a graphic, aluminum cans, plastic 3 to 7, 3-color mixed glass, because all the glass gets broken. There's no more segregation by color because it's single stream compaction truck, and the single stream lines break everything. HDP is a type of plastic. Metal. Mixed paper is the orange one, is the largest. OCC, that's the blue, corrugated cardboard boxes. And what's my green one there? That's a pretty large one. I have a hard time seeing the colors. 3-color mix, because that's a heavy, glass is heavy.
Oh yeah.
That's glass. In reality, everybody's focusing on plastics, but the plastics are a light commodity, and all diversions based on tons. So if you got every piece of plastic out of the waste stream, you're not going to get a higher percentage diversion per se, because it's all on tons. That's a light commodity. And the other thing I try to demonstrate, if everybody thinks it's recyclable. Well, technically, everything is recyclable. Is it marketable? Technically, it all could be recyclable, but can you sell it? Sometimes you have to pay to make it get recycled. So all those are economics that come into play that ultimately end up in the rate that the generator, resident, apartment house, or a commercial establishment is going to pay. And we collect all the blue bin, we sort through it. This is the value aggregated on a per ton sold. It's a roller coaster ride. I've been involved in the business almost 50 years now. And I remember the day when we were lucky we got $20 a ton in the 80s or late 70s. But since we took over this contract, 2011, everything we were able to sell was worth $147 a ton. Now, there's things that have taken place in the recycling. The economy is one thing. If everybody's slowed down, no one's buying product, there's no need for this feedstock to go back into new products. We weren't here in Los Altos in 2008 when the economy fell off the cliff, but we've had some ups and downs. Construction was going gangbusters there for a while. There's been growth in the community. I see it about 1% a year, according to the state numbers on population. But then we had China soared, stopped buying material. I think I got some other slides in there, but you look at 2011 through 2019, a substantial drop in the value of the material after it's been processed in the recycling world. And then you just look at January 2020, which in the pandemic, most of that year, we're starting to see it come back a little bit. I can't figure all that out. So, but the value of those materials really ultimately affect the recyclability. So factors affecting diversion in Los Altos, the top in blacks from my earlier slide, some of the construction material we don't handle, so we can't account for. So if a contractor come and remodel a house, they'll decide to haul it themselves. Well, they could haul it straight to the landfill, or they could haul it to a processing facility to get some diversion, but that's going to cost them more. Are they motivated as a contractor doing work for a resident to go the cheapest way? Now the city has ordinances about, giving a plan saying you have to divert so much or the like, but I don't know how successful they are. Some of the grocery stores in town are taking back all their recycling and their food waste. All we're getting is their garbage. So we're not getting both sides of the equation. So we're losing out on diversion because they are hauling it themselves and they are not reporting it to anybody. So the city can't even account for it. Downtown Los Altos is pretty tight. There's not a lot of space for recycling containers. I don't know if you notice, we have those large blue containers in parking lots. Those are commingled. Everybody gets to share those because they might not have their individual container. But convenience is the most important thing in recycling, in my opinion. If it's not convenient, people get lazy and they might put it in a closest container, which probably is a garbage container. We have some multifamily complexes that have not taken on the organics, food waste diversion. Well, that's going to be mandatory with 1383, so we should see some improvement there. Homeowners association, management companies, they don't want them. People don't, someone's got to clean it up. It costs money. So anything when you get those multi-unit dwellings and there's a management team or the landlords, it gets difficult to accomplish the goals. We've been in a drought. Everybody's doing drought resistant yards, which is a good thing, but that means less organic material to be diverted. And that kind of affects the numbers. And the new things we're dealing with is China soared, the trade war created a problem, the pandemics had an effect. And most recently, once I get the material, I sort it, bale it, ready to go, ship it off, we have a buyer, we can't get shipping containers. To the extent right now, today, my containers full of mixed paper are being driven to Los Angeles to be put on ships because that's where the containers came in. There's no shipping containers available at the Port of Oakland because they didn't come in. So I got 35 loads sitting in the yard. I got a buyer, but they can't get a container to ship them. So there's a bunch of things in the world that kind of affect what I need to do to accomplish what the city needs, the state requires. It's a ongoing dilemma. So I'll kind of stop sharing this one and I guess take questions, or I could bring up some other slides if necessary.
Well, we've had a few questions in the chat box. Let's see. We got one about those trash cans that are downtown, those big blue ones. They do get sorted by you guys, right? Hauled off to the.
We have, that's a commercial front loader truck that picks up just all recycling, which includes those, anything in blue is picked up by a dedicated truck and goes to the recycling line, the big blue ones. The litter cans on the street, the little green ones, those are also picked up by a recycling truck. We know they have trash in them. We hope they have some recycling in them, but we process those too to kind of mine whatever we can out of them.
All right, because it does say it's going to be sorted.
Yeah.
So you do. Might not be your most valuable source of material because it does get contaminated.
But the other option was to put another can out there that's just for recycling, which probably wouldn't be fully utilized. Those cans at the city's cost are like $1,200 each. And you'd have to send another truck to collect that separately. And some, Los Altos isn't too bad, but most other public litter cans get, I don't use the word pilferage, but somebody sorts through them other than us to get the good material out.
Okay, that makes it even less appealing. I know we go to great effort at the farmer's market when we had them to train people to put it in the right container. So it's a challenge. Things do get cross-contaminated. I'd like to give, I know plastic is a low weight item, so it's not a big part of our diversion rate, but I'm just curious can you really sort ones and twos away from the rest of this stuff? Because the 1 and 2 has the value and the rest of it doesn't.
Yes, the number one is the PET. That's your soda bottle, your water bottle. Number 2 is the HDPE, your opaque milk jug and the like. Those are large sized with the screening process and the sort line. Yes, and they have the most value. The PTE is the most valuable and HDP is the second. Number 5 has a market. That's the mixed plastic, as I call it, 3 through 7, and 5's kind of in there. I'm not sure the volume of those 3 through 7s in comparison to the whole stream. For 8 months, those mixed plastics, we would bale, and one of the concepts to get more diversion, we would truck that material down to Los Angeles that had a facility that was just bringing in all that mixed plastic.
Hello? Yeah.
The focus just on that mixed plastic to get greater volumes in segregated so they could get a better market for it. Couldn't make it work.
Oh,
Market wasn't there. The cost, our operation in San Leandro is a union organized with a living wage of $19 an hour now. A lot of this sorting goes on by minimum wage, not even a living wage. And, I'm not, every community is different, but it's nowhere near $15 on a minimum wage in a lot of these sorting facilities. Everybody's looking at AI and robots to accomplish that, but that's not mainstream yet. So somebody has to touch every one of those items, in particular the plastic, manually to get it into the right bucket to try and get it to a market that will accept it.
okay. So that's just not practical. What about the plastic bags? Some stores are taking those back now.
Well, quite a few years ago, the plastic bag ban on I would call them the t-shirt bans, that's been successful. They're not in our stream. They mess up the sort equipment. They blow in the yard. Those have been great. But not everybody has to put a deposit or bring your own bags now. That's been fantastic. And it's been successful.
How clean do
Lots
they?
of good,
How clean do these
lots of
things
good-
have to be?
Gary,
Yeah.
It's Margie. There's a lot of good questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm trying to grab a couple of them. You want to help me out?
Sure. I mean, the last one is, I wonder how clean do some of those containers have to be before tossing them in the recycling bin?
The cleaner, the better. 10 years ago, it wasn't an issue, but some of the legislation now is going to require quality control of end products, even in your food scraps, in your green container, plastic bags, metal. 1383 requires an audit of a certain amount of customers on a quarterly basis to see if there's non-organic material in your green container, if there's organic material in your blue container, and if there's organic and recyclable material in your garbage container. In theory, the state's going to created a policing program that the jurisdictions need to implement. And if they could find a customer or generator is not in compliance over a number of times, the city will have the ability by state law to fine them.
Oh boy.
This new legislation to get to these goals, the state has decided to go to that extent and put the onus on the city to do it. And the city will have a legal authority to fine a generator, a customer that's not in compliance.
Oh my goodness. That sounds like an enforcement nightmare.
It is.
A couple of questions as well.
Margie.
Couple of other questions about composting. Donna Staten, who is a Los Altos Hills resident, says, can you talk what's composted, how long it takes? Will the system change to allow more types of compostable material? And kind of along those lines, Connie asks that it's my understanding you cannot compost all type of compostables. Is there a way you can change your composting to accept types that require more time and heat to compost?
So when it comes to the organic stream, you have your yard waste, your green material of a residential yard. Our programs, big focus now is food scraps. There's 7 million tons of food waste that are going into the landfill that they want to get diverted in the state of California. It's very difficult to track how much food scraps is going into your green waste container now. Visually, you can't weigh it. But in some of our other jurisdictions, we have food scrap segregated and put into a split cart on the garbage container, or even a fourth cart just for food scraps. So in those programs and pilots we've done, we've been able to take 20% out of the garbage container in this food scraps segregated collection program. Yard waste is the cleanest, simplest thing to compost. It kind of all degrades at the same time. You got to get a certain temperature for pathogen reduction in so many days. And if you do it right, it's going to take longer. If it's a cleaner stream, you'll get a better quality and could be considered organic compost, finished product. Compost is really the finished product. Composting is the process. As soon as you mix food material in with that stream, it'll just decompose at different rates. You could have meat scraps in there, which the pathogen reduction is very important. You'll start to see plastic. We promote the little kitchen pail. When we rolled out the program, everybody got a plastic bag in it for the ick factor. We take that in with the green waste now, but that has to be sorted out somewhere along the process. The composters, the one that actually doing the process, they're going to have to meet there'll be a standard that they can't have too much contamination in their finished product. When you add the food waste, they now have leachate problems at the landfill. The juices are going to flow out. Odor could be created, and the VOCs of volatile organic compounds are dissipating in the composting process. A lot of that's done in open windrows now, or before this is over, all composting will have to probably be done in vessel to capture the leachate and any of the gases coming off of it. Expensive proposition.
So you're actually going to capture the methane?
methane, and anything else that's coming off of it. We're already looking at numbers for the next 10 years on composting. What we're paying today is going to double in 10 years from now with these new regulations that are coming down on the actual composting of the material. Today, your green cart's costing about $78 a ton to process that material in a green cart. In 2032, it's going to be $150 a ton. And if you have commercial material, it's even greater. Everybody's faced with new regulations from the air board, the water board. It's just getting more difficult to accomplish this stuff. And it's major capital investment, timing and permit issues. Everything's going to cost more.
Does your new contract call for some new capital investment?
We're replacing all the current fleet in Los Altos. We started out in 2010 with compressed natural gas trucks. So by the end of the year, they will look the same, but there will be new trucks on the streets of Los Altos. That's the major replacement. The trucks last about 10, 12 years, but
These are still natural gas burning vehicles?
Yes. I know there's a big push to go electric, but they're not prime time yet. And they would currently double the cost of the vehicle. And cycle time on the batteries, and no one's really nailed down on the capital invested in the infrastructure to be able to charge, in our case, 50 trucks overnight. The amount of power and the infrastructure that some of the, can't depend on PG&E too much, but to get them to be able to get that amount of power to a small spot to recharge these trucks hasn't been figured out yet.
There's another question, Louie, about, actually a couple of people have raised this question, that they'd be happy to separate recyclables into a couple of different streams, just as you mentioned with the compost, the yard waste and the food waste in some communities, instead of just a single stream. And, what are the possibilities here? Would this be a better option?
Well, I'm a big proponent of split cart or dual stream when it comes to recycling. We give you a container that's split down the middle. You put all your fiber stuff on one side and all the glass containers and plastic on the other side. It's almost guaranteed a better quality product coming out because the juices and the food and the glass doesn't get mixed with the fiber, the paper. Your paper is your biggest stream. And then what we did on the garbage and the food scraps, that was a split cart. We have that in Milpitas, Sunnyvale's there. We got shot down. This was all kind of put in front of council on this extension and staff, and they didn't want to go there. I just bought $7 million worth of trucks that are coming that aren't split. So, I can't.
You're committed.
So one other question, I think this might have been mine, is about markets. I know you have kind of talked before about, so it looks like the markets are going up, which is encouraging. The fact that mixed plastic, even though it's not economical at this moment, you have some markets for that. That's great. I know mixed waste paper was a big challenge because it's so much volume and China was no longer accepting it. What are your main markets for mixed waste paper now?
Well, we're brokering it through Waste Management, is one of the largest waste hauling companies. Vietnam was a market, India, Southeast Asia. I'm not sure. The ports aren't developed to take all that material. They are now clamping down with some of the same regulations as China. Quality, they're overburdened. Who knows really what happened that gets in those developing countries. They need the product, but they're not environmentally not probably doing it right. On the paper side, domestic mills. There are some mills being developed in the Southeast with Chinese money because they can't get it over there. If we cleaned up that mixed paper here and made a pulp roll, which is product that's ready to go to China to be made into whatever they want to make it with. We could export that and they would accept that. They don't want the messy job of cleaning up all our paper. Environmentally, paper mills are dirty, nasty, take a lot of water and a lot of energy. There's one or two little ones in California, they all went away. You have to retool to handle that stream of material. I don't see those coming back to California. So we'd have to ship to the Southeast and then it'd probably go to China. So the fiber is the biggest volume, probably the biggest problem.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
I talked about the plastic, and Margie, I think we talked about this with your group before. We don't know where the silver bullet's going to be for plastic. My concept is if it's feasible to recycle, maybe not now, maybe something will come up. You know, they got bugs eating the plastic. They were melting the plastic back in the oil. Everybody's trying to find a solution for plastic. I believe keep putting it in the blue container. Once you put it in the garbage container, it's going to go to landfill. You'll have to re-educate everybody, you know, and it's potentially someday could be a fuel source. You know, we stopped drilling for oil. Plastic comes from oil. We might have to, and right now taking that plastic and putting it back to an oil, when a barrel of oil was $150 a barrel, it made sense. But at these prices for oil now, the technology is too expensive. We might be there someday. I've even thrown out that to state legislature, we should have a monofill. This plastic that we currently can't sell, can't find a market for, we should bury it all in one spot.
Yeah, I love that idea.
It won't create methane gas. It won't rot. It'll be there for future generations to mine someday, to put it back to good use. So that could be a solution, but sometimes the environmental, it's a hole in the ground, you're filling it up. That's not recycling.
Gary, do we have time for one more question? There's one other that's.
Yeah, we have time.
It has to do with illegal dumping, concern that the increased costs will have this unintended consequence. And Roy even mentions that he's already seen quite a bit more dumping on the side of the road, whether or not that's actual dumping or cleanup, backup, I don't know.
I think Los Altos, you know, illegal dumping, if you look at some of these other communities, San Jose, Oakland, we're pristine in Los Altos. It's a big issue all over the state. Maybe what they're seeing is the annual pickup, the white bags, but that was part of to keep those in the white bags. You get it twice a year as a resident. It's stormwater issues and the like. City doesn't report. Our trucks go down the streets once a week. We're seeing what's going on, but in reality, I don't think there's a lot of illegal dumping going on the streets. People might be putting stuff in apartment dumpsters or commercial dumpsters, but even that we don't hear a lot about in Los Altos.
I think they're seeing it on the highways.
Yeah. So you got Caltrans has got some responsibility. I know that the trains in San Jose, where there's issues there. The world's all messed up right now, and it's not. In that respect, it's getting worse and worse every day.
Okay, any final thoughts, anybody? I mean, I'm encouraged. The diversion rates are holding up. It's a really complicated topic. There's so many things you're trying to juggle here. It's unbelievable. And not the least of which is the roller coaster on the pricing. Once China stopped taking plastics, that made a huge impact. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I think ultimately reducing the amount of things that we waste in the first place would be one way to tackle it. We don't start out with using so much plastic. I know in Europe, they're talking about trying to simplify the kinds of plastics that can even be used to try to simplify the waste stream. The diversion rates.
I use an example. You go in a grocery store right now and a quart of milk, you could see it in 3 different containers, a PET, HDP, and gable top, a septic package. Why?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Is it marketing? Is it?
So instead of trying to clean it up at the end, why not just start out with a simpler system that makes it easier to clean up at the end? That's another approach. But that, you know, you're the guy that's trying to consolidate it. You're doing your best with that. The way to handle this other stuff is through legislation, and we're getting a lot of legislation, which is, as you point out, is going to make things more costly. So I don't know, that could have some downside too. As one person pointed out, maybe there'll be some more illegal dumping because of it. I don't think that'll be the case, not here in Los Altos, but it is something to think about. Anyway, Louie, it's always a delight. Thank you so much. Wonderful information, and we had a good turnout, over 40 people at one point. So thank you, participants. Next Tuesday, we've got Hidden Villa showing up. They're going to tell us about regenerative agriculture. Maybe that's another way to reduce our waste. We'll find out what they're up to. I took a bike ride out there recently, and I saw they had a lot of big pigs running around in the fields, so we'll see what they're up to. So thank you, everybody. And that's it. See you next week.
Thank you.